Now, y'all look money hungry, and that's good.
Do I have your full attention?
Anybody tells you money's the root of all evil doesn't fucking have it.
What? People stop wanting some history on here. You don't understand it.
They say money can't buy happiness. Look at the fucking smile on my face. Ear to ear, baby.
Hello and welcome to the second episode of The Root of All Evil. My name is Devilmaycare.
And I am Mammon.
And yes, we are back with the second episode. Before we get started, I'd like to thank a couple people. First, I'd like to thank John Shaw for being our first guest and for running the Third Side Network.
Mm-hmm.
Who else?
And I'd like to thank Gyps Fulvis for putting all the music together. That was awesome of him.
Absolutely. Gyps, I love our intro music. It's awesome. Very well done.
And he was very easy to work with.
Yes, he is. Anybody else? Who else do we need to thank?
Absolutely no one.
Fuck everyone else. No,
no, the listener feedback. That was awesome. We got a lot of good feedback, and we're looking forward to it. It motivates us to do it again.
Yeah. And I guess I was going to say we owe the audience an apology, but I'm not big on apologizing for being busy. But we will try to get more episodes out more quickly in the future, as long as we're not overloaded, which we always are.
Yeah, pretty much. Always busy. Every time we get in here, we're always squeezing it in between 1,000 other things to do, but it's totally worth it.
Yep. It's good times. I would also like to let the audience know that if you have any questions, if you have show topic requests, or if you just want to send us pictures of female naughty bits,
Either way,
any of the above. Our email address is troaepodcast@gmail.com. That's troaepodcast@gmail.com.
Mm-hmm. And definitely send them in, because we will read them. We will go over it. There's so much to cover. It just helps if we know what people are specifically interested in. And if you got anything going on in current events or news, ask us about it. We'll go over it with you.
Absolutely. So what do you want to talk about?
Well, why are we doing another show?
Why are we doing this show at all?
Yeah, right.
Because we have such an abundance of free time.
Pretty much. Really, there's an abundance of topics. That's kind of what I was mentioning a second ago. There's just so much going on, and you couldn't cover it all in one show. And there's an entire industry about this, so it's not like we'll ever run out of anything to really go over.
Right. But here's a question, and it's an honest question. Why another show about money or business or finance? What's the point? What makes us different? And what's the point of focusing on money at all?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of myths about money. So, I mean, that's kind of what we're here for, is to help clarify and, shed some light on it.
Myths about money, such as money is the root of all evil?
Of course. I've heard that before.
No, it's always been funny to me. I can't say always, I guess, but once I started paying attention to this stuff, it's blew my mind how people are so afraid of this topic. And I think mostly it's out of probably embarrassment, shame, because they don't feel like they know enough about it. And it's intentionally made confusing by the gurus out there, the powers that be. They like to muddy the waters. So, but yeah, I mean, it's just a fact of life. It's something that each one of us really has to wrap our heads around and deal with, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, and about those gurus, don't let them get in the way. Just because there's terminology and things you don't understand, they all started somewhere. And it's like lifting weights. You're not going to start off at bench pressing 500 pounds. You just got to start somewhere, and that's what we're here for.
Absolutely. Study, not worship. That whole thing comes into play with this topic over and over.
That sounds
and
familiar.
over again. I don't know who said that. Some guy.
Yeah. One of my favorite myths about money is that it takes money to make money. And while there's a degree of truth to that, it doesn't take quite as much as you think. You don't have to have $1 million to make $2 million. You just need to get started.
And yeah, I mean, you don't need like you said, you don't need a lot of money to get started, whether it's investing, whether it's starting a business. I mean, if all you have is $100, then start with $100. Just be intelligent about it. And if you're not going to invest money into starting a business or, running a portfolio or whatever, then you need to invest time. And honestly, when you're getting started, it's probably going to be weighted more towards the time side. But yeah, you got to start somewhere. So start with what you have. And if you have nothing, then start saving.
Yeah, pretty much. In any way you can. It doesn't have to be any type of huge contributions. You just have to really come up with a plan. I'm always reminded of the Jim Carrey story where he wrote himself that $1 million check and told himself, in X amount of time, I'm going to be able to cash this to myself. And he just kept it. And it was just kind of his goal. And he just stared at it. And then he worked and he worked and he, eventually was able to do it.
Wait. He had to work for that?
Yeah, apparently. No one just handed it to him.
I think that needs to be touched on a little bit as well. There's a lot of bullshit out there when it comes to money. And one of the most popular books about money is Think and Grow Rich, which really focuses on visualization. And, we're Satanists, greater magic, all that stuff, visualization, greater magic. I'm going to tell you flat out, it doesn't work if you don't actually get off your ass.
Pretty much, yeah. And I always like to throw in lesser magic even because that's pretty much sales. And sales is a favorite of mine just because you have the opportunity to earn more than your regular hourly grind. So with normal jobs, you can work 5 hours and you know exactly what you're going to get. But with sales and any type of commission, you have the ability to bump up a little bit more, even if it's not a whole lot. But it all is going to come down to your appearance, how you're portraying yourself, your tone, everything. And it just all comes together and it can be the boost you need.
Speaking of sales is one of those things where even if you don't have a commission job or a sales job, you should learn sales. It's, you're always selling somebody, whether you're trying to sell your boss on a promotion, whether you're trying to sell a potential customer on a product that you make. It's one of those things where you use it every day. I use it every day anyways. Absolutely.
I mean, it's cliche to almost go back to Glenn Ross, but ABC, always be closing. And that's always true. And it's exactly like you said, you might be just wanting to get a promotion or take on a new project or anything, but you're selling yourself all the time.
Another good one that people should learn is negotiation. It's definitely a skill to have under your belt.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, that's as integral a part of any sales, really.
Absolutely. So are we ready to introduce our guests?
I think so. Who do we have?
So today I'd like to introduce somebody that is special to me. It's an extraordinary honor for me to have him on as a guest of the show, for us to have him as a guest of the show.
Yeah, I'm a part of it.
Sorry about that. No, but this is a person who, it was actually this person with conversations with him that inspired me to start looking at things like the stock market, which eventually led me to my career. And yeah, I probably wouldn't be here without this person. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce a dear friend and Magister of the Church of Satan, Magister Nemo, everybody.
Magister Nemo, thank you very much for joining us today, and welcome to the show. Oh, thanks so much for the invitation, Devilmaycare. I think it's going to be fun and interesting. At least I hope so.
Same here.
I hope so, too. Mammon, do you want to kick us off with some questions?
Yeah. Magister Nemo, you've got a history with finances. Tell us, is money evil?
Oh, yes, absolutely. To quote the doctor, Dr. LII, evil is just live spelled backwards, after all.
Yes.
This whole thing about declaring that money is just a transaction symbol. It's something we use to get things that we need that other people want, so we don't have to barter with everything. If you had to barter with everything, the whole world would collapse anyway. So money is a very useful tool. And this whole thing about it becoming evil, I have a strong suspicion this was part of how to control people, to keep them in their place, not let them think they should aspire to something more in their lives. And so, therefore, if you name it as evil, well, then, of course, who the heck wants to be evil except crazy Satanists like us, right? Okay.
Me, yeah. Yeah, me.
So I don't think it's really evil in the sense that they put it, no. I think it's a very, very useful tool. It can work against you. It can be the worst thing that happened if you become a slave to it. To also quote the doc, choose your masters wisely. If money has become your master as opposed to a very good servant, you may be in trouble. But there's always a way out, and that's because the money can go away really fast, too.
Where do you think
yes,
the stigma comes from? Because I still tend to see the stigma with Satanists that money is I guess a bad thing. I don't want to say evil, but I don't know how else to put it. A lot of Satanists still view money as a bad thing, and I personally struggled to figure that out. You know, we celebrate the 7 sins, and greed is definitely one of those. And I mean, when it's tempered, it can do a lot of good for the individual. Any idea why Satanists still have trouble with that?
Oh, yeah. My goodness, what is it? Something like, the largest church in the whole world still is the Roman Catholic Church, and that has more adherents than any other single church, and we throw in the rest of all of Christianity, all of Islam, and we include the Abrahamic Jewish faith as well. And what is their fundamentals? It is, generally speaking, an issue of I'm thinking primarily of the New Testament with Christ, with saying things like, it is easier for, I may not get this quote right, I'm not a good biblical student any longer, as I ever was, but the whole business about you can't go to heaven if you're a rich person. It's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven. That's just one example. But we were brought up in a culture, and it's the largest civilized culture in the world, that adheres to these views, and it just saturates our expectations. We hear it from the time we're young enough to begin to learn anything, and if it didn't affect us, I'd really be quite surprised. That's why it's important, I think, to challenge these myths. There's many myths about money. That's one of them, is that money is evil. It'll corrupt you. Absolute power will corrupt you, absolutely, and money will corrupt you even faster because it's a method of getting power, that kind of thing. Am I answering your question, or am I babbling on in the wrong direction?
No, you're definitely answering the question. I mean, you said it pretty clearly when you said that money is a tool. Ultimately, that's all it is, and you can either let it own you, choose your masters wisely, or you can own it and use it. And it's just always kind of baffled me that Satanists, of all people, still seem to, well, and I can't say all of them, I know some of them have this down, but a lot of them, from what I've seen, still have an issue with this. And like I said, it's just always baffled me as to why that is.
And that's a great point, and what Magister Nemo brings up, and very accurately, for better or worse, Christianity has had the largest impact on the human race than anything else. And they've set up this false dichotomy that, you know, between capitalism and between trying to attain wealth and being happy and self-sustaining. At the same time, they're opposing that with the idea that money is evil. And it isn't until Satanism that we see things saying to embrace such an attitude, to take control of that tool. And I think that regardless of whatever your upbringing is, you might have been raised by atheist parents, there's still that cultural aspect that money is evil, and yet you have to have it. And so because you have to have it, someone's got to learn about it. Someone knows about it, and some of the wisest things you can ever do is have the courage to ask. And that's really what I'm hoping we can do here.
Oh, yeah. That was brilliantly put, Mammon. Thank you.
Thank you.
So what about when people say stuff like kill the rich, eat the rich, down with the rich? I mean,
Aerosmith made a song called that. Aerosmith made a song called Eat the Rich. It was on the old Get a Grip album.
Nemo, do you think that's a good idea to look at things that way?
No. You know, one of the authors that influenced Dr. LaVey was Ayn Rand. And I would challenge anyone who wants to dig into these things on a deep level to read a fun collection of essays called Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal by Ayn Rand, in order to get a better idea of, well, what is this issue about who are the rich? The impression when they say that is that we are being controlled by a tiny elite group of Illuminati rich people out there that all get together the way we're supposed to, but don't. But they get together and they rule the world. They have the threads in everything. They have so much of the wealth of the world. And yet if you look at the way they live their lives, for the most part, they're no better off than other people. They just really don't understand a lot of things about their own lives. They may have a lot of money, but they'll do stupid things too. It's very easy. So this thing about, first of all, if you want to use sour grapes psychology, and you remember from Aesop's fable where I think it was a fox, kept looking up into the tree where the grapes were hanging that he really wanted to eat. He kept jumping and jumping, trying to get them, couldn't get the grapes, and finally said, oh, they're probably sour anyway, and just went off. The sour grapes way to deal with things is if it's a great excuse to say when you don't have the things that you want or the control over your life that you do want, well, all I have to do is find who can I blame. If I can blame someone, whether it's true or not, if I can blame them, that gets me off the hook. It isn't really my responsibility to take care of these things. It's because of those damned rich people. And if we only take that pie that they're secluding and keeping from the rest of us, which is all of this is precisely the opposite of what's really going on. We have producers. Some of the richest people in the world have produced some of the most amazing things in the world, such as the Internet, such as the different smartphones, Apple. The people who produce these things are giving us wealth. They're generating things that did not exist before. They're creating things which were absent in our world. And this is getting faster, not slower. Things are becoming exponential in terms of their growth. Wealth is becoming widespread more and more, despite the opinions of some folks who really, really are so angry that they don't have what they want that they have to blame it on someone else. I could go on a lot here. I better slow down.
No, not at all. I've had conversations with Dorian Gray and on various topics, and he is always quick to point out that a lot of people have knee-jerk reactions based on emotions, particularly fear and confusion. And there's many times where I see even Satanists who want to knock on Ayn Rand because of maybe some personal stances that she had or some personal things she said. But as we know, watching what we call the Muggles talk about Dr. LaVey, you might have some things to say about the person, but their philosophy is solid. And I think objectivism is really a solid philosophy because at the end of the day, no matter what you think about money, it is a part of your life. And as Mammon said, it's a tool. Or, sorry, as Devilmaycare said, it's a tool. You've got to either use it or don't use it, and it can really enhance your life.
Couldn't agree more. Go ahead.
I was going to say that fear that you guys were talking about, I know that fear. I've lived that fear. I remember what it's like to be poor and be angry that, I didn't know how to do this, how to figure this thing out, and then be afraid that if, once I started to try, that I would fail. And so I get that people struggle with that. And I don't know, the only advice I can possibly offer to that kind of situation is just do it. Just do it anyways. And like with anything else, you'll probably try and fail, but if you keep trying, eventually you're going to figure it out.
Or you might shock yourself, try and succeed right off the bat.
Right, yeah.
That may even be a bad thing, yeah.
Sometimes we succeed in spite of ourselves, And Magister Nemo, would you say it's fair to say that we all feel those fears and those tendencies to be confused about topics such as money, but what separates us from everyone else is our willingness to learn?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If you're walking into a dark cave and you can't see anything, you may have a very good reason to be afraid that you're going to stumble, break your leg, run into a bear or a skunk, and these kind of things are not desirable. But if you can have a little flashlight and turn on and see where you're going, it makes all the difference in the world. And people who, they talk about math phobia, people who don't like math. Well, you don't even have to know math to be able to handle money. All you need to do is be able to understand a lot of the very simple things that are around that. And for years, the terminology that's wrapped around how to invest or how to make money, how to build a business, all of these things have seemed esoteric. And, I have to go to an Ivy League college for 6 years in order to be able to get a grasp. I've got to get an MBA, a Master in Business Administration or something, which is all nonsense. The kind of information that's now available is even easier than ever before in order to be able to understand what is the game of money and how to play it so that you can win more often than lose. And that's really what it's all about, in my opinion.
I couldn't agree more. As somebody who's worked in the financial industry for quite some time now, I can 100% say that a lot of the terms and jargon, I guess, for lack of a better word, is there deliberately to confuse people and make one person feel smarter than the other. And you don't need to know the jargon. You don't need to understand the jargon to make money work for you. You just don't. Everything to do with finances can be boiled down to third grade math.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree more with that. Oh, absolutely. I mean, especially, and those 2 points tie in so beautifully together because the jargon can absolutely be daunting. When you just look, I have at my home, I have a dictionary of just jargon, and it's thousands of pages long, and it's just a dictionary of financial jargon. But in the real world, we don't use all of that. And as Magister Nemo just pointed out, in the age of technology, ignorance is a choice. You can easily go to Investopedia and start looking up the stuff if you really wanted to.
Yep, absolutely. So, Magister Nemo, for Satanists who are just getting started and are just trying to wrap their head around this creating wealth thing or investing, where would you point them?
Two things that I have recommended to a lot of people to do. And I want to explain why the first one, because it may be a little bit out of left field for a lot of folks. But there is the popular view. And we're elite, so we're not that popular. We're in a small group of people. And I'd like to see that group expand so that we have more people that find out that they really belong with us. But the overall fact of the matter is that most people out there assume that the world is doomed. There's no future. Everything's going to hell. It's always, well, not hell, I should say. That's not such a bad idea. But they really do have a negative, pessimistic expectation about what the future holds for the world and therefore for themselves. And that's so absolutely backwards from the way things are actually going that I usually try to recommend that they go to the internet and look up Abundance, the book by Diamandis. He's the CEO for the Singularity University. It's one of the major fundings from Bill Gates, for example, supports that for some years. And you don't even have to read his book. Just listen to one of their videos where they describe the things that were going on 6 years ago that you probably haven't even heard about. And I'm speaking about the people that are listening. You gentlemen may have heard about a lot of these things, but
it's a fantastic book.
Yeah, exactly. Because you want to break up this assumption that, well, what's the use? You are surrounded by people who assume, what's the use? If it bleeds, it reads. If it's blood, it's red. And that's the way they've been selling news for years. And it's the same thing exactly now with blogs, with interviews that are on video, with the news. Everything that we look at is intended to tell you what's wrong, what's scary, what's bad. And this book goes in and says, well, okay, what is the truth about the situation? Are things worse or better? Are they getting better? Are they getting worse? What's the truth? And I'm not saying that we are going to be not faced with, for instance, nuclear war might set us back a little bit. Oh, yeah, maybe totally.
Yeah, just a little.
Just a little. And then again, maybe not. But the thing I like to say is never, never, never bet on doomsday because you can't collect. There's no way you can collect if you bet on doomsday. Always bet that things are going to probably survive. You don't have to be stupid about it. So the very first thing as I recommend is challenge the pessimism that surrounds us in the mass media, in your friends, in your relatives, in your buddies, in the people that you go to school with, the people that you work with, whatever situation. Don't just assume that because most people assume the world is going to hell in a handbasket that it really is. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
Find out that there's something going on. The second thing is actually a game which I believe is now a free app on the internet, and it's called the Cash Flow game. Cash Flow to get out of the rat race is created by Robert Kiyosaki. I won't vouch for everything he's been involved in, but the game is great because it takes what goes into money, in my opinion, overall, so that you can come from just trying to get a job all the way to being completely independent, financially independent. And because it's a game and you do it and you can compress time so that you can, instead of spending months, weeks, years to do something, you can do it in a few minutes playing with your computer and learn things about, well, what is an income versus an expense in reality as opposed to accounting perfection with all the terminology they use. So I think that is a great game because it really does help map out where you can go with money and why it isn't really such an esoteric subject at all. In fact, it's very down to earth and it can be understood. Those are my two biggest suggestions for folks to just get started, because once you have removed the pessimism, and secondly, then you kind of understand, well, how do I get to where I want to go? Then you can notch it down to find out, well, what exactly do I need to do that? That's just the third step. So that's how I view it. That's what I've been suggesting to people for quite a few years now.
It makes sense, too, because one of the things...
Go ahead.
Throughout culture, many cultures, many religions have always preached some sort of a doomsday apocalyptic event, and the only thing they have in common is all being wrong. Don't bet on doomsday. Don't bet on doomsday. If there's one quote I can walk away with from here, that's it. Don't bet on doomsday. I love it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Can't collect. It's terrible. Bad gambling approach. Very poor. You won't make money doing that.
Why even bother?
I would say, Nemo, that both of your suggestions are excellent. I've read Abundance, And it is like I said, it is a fantastic book. And I've also played the cash flow game that you're speaking of, and it is free online. It is available to anybody. And it's not perfect, but it's definitely a good place to start to grasp these things. And I wanted to expand a little bit on your third point, that once you get a basic understanding and you figure out what you want to do, the next step is to figure out the next step. There's an author by the name of M.J. DeMarco who is a guru of sorts for entrepreneurs, and he was asked recently, what book should I read? What's the most important thing for me to read to become a successful entrepreneur? And his answer was, you have to look for the answer to the problem that you're facing right now. So if you're just trying to learn about investments, start reading about that. If you want to learn how to market, start reading marketing books. You have to figure out the problem that's facing you at this very moment.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. That sounds like Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you're familiar with that psychological setup.
Oh, yes.
That's for people who are listening. I'm just looking at a chart that shows that it's like a pyramid, and at the bottom of the pyramid there's your physical needs: food, water, sleep. If you take care of the bottom of the pyramid, then you can move up to safety, such as a home sweet home. And then if you get that under control, then you can move up to things like meaningful relationships, love, belonging with other people that you enjoy, and then getting up to where you can seek to acquire skills that cause people to say, oh, well, look at that, he's doing a good job, esteem in that sense. And then finally self-actualization at the tip top. That was his terminology. I don't agree with the self-esteem part, but I take a different take on that. Nevertheless, this whole thing of building from the bottom, if somebody, I'm thinking about, I've seen this over and over again where I've run into different artists, for instance, who seem to think that it is something wonderful about being the starving artist and I'm earning the right to succeed by having a difficult time, as opposed to, okay, if I want to be an artist and I can't pay the bills to eat and pay the rent, I need to get anything that'll take care of that, take care of the physiological first. So anything to get by, and that's the first focus. If that's what you were talking about, is working your way up that same hierarchy. Is that what you meant, Mammon?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, I don't even know how to build on that. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Okay, because the thing is that so many people feel they have to somehow start at the top. Robert Ringer in Winning Through Intimidation called that the leapfrog method. He said if you declare yourself as being the king of the hill, you can do that, and that may be a way to short-circuit the whole effort in terms of trying to get to the top. But if you haven't acquired the skills to stay there, you'll probably be knocked down by a lot of other people that have been leapfrogging already and are perhaps better at it. So the idea of building a firm foundation and then on top of that rising so that it's solid instead of just trying to leap to the top of something is a very wise choice. And it seems to be the way that most people can do it, because then you build confidence as you go up, as you gain more control over what you're doing. And I think very much this is all an issue of, do I feel out of control with my life in this or that category? And often it comes down to money. Money is often a big bugaboo for most people in those areas. That's been my experience in talking with folks over the years.
Absolutely. And it's hard to make $100,000 if you can't make 1,000, and you can't make $1 million unless you can figure out how to make 100,000, and so on and so forth.
Exactly. Magister Nemo, could you describe financial independence? Do you have any insight on how people should go about trying to achieve it?
Yeah. Boy, I love this one. Thank you. Financial independence, the way I define it, and I don't know if others absolutely agree with this definition, but I found it to be really useful, And that's when you sit down and you add up, what does it cost for me to live? Not what does it cost for me to have a good time, but what does it cost for me to pay the bills, to be able to pay the rent or mortgage, to be able to pay for whatever insurance I have, to be able to buy the groceries, put gas in the car, to have a car, all of those things. And you add it up, and you can break it down monthly or annual, but you say, okay, it costs me X number of dollars per month to pay the bills. When you have found a way to have money work for you so that the money generates that amount of money, so that you wouldn't have to work if you didn't want to, and the money will work for you instead, that's financial independence, because you're independent of having to make money. As long as you feel that I have to work in order to earn a living, I don't know where you're earning it from, but anyway, if you have to work to earn a living, you're still trapped. You're trapped in a mindset which believes a number of things, such as time is money, such as it takes money to always make money, that all these different fantasies that really do rule our opinions in this culture. Money can't buy happiness. That's the sour grapes again. It doesn't buy unhappiness either, and poverty sure doesn't buy it. So overall, financial independence is when you can find a way that instead of you having to work anymore to make money, you have put money to work for you making money. For example, a very poor example at this point in the U.S. economy. If you put money into a savings account in a bank, it will draw interest. You will make money from their use of your money that you've given them, and they'll give a certain fixed amount of interest that it's growing. So it's making money for you. Interest that you're making in a savings account is money that is being generated by money, not you. You're not having to go out and do anything to make that happen. The bank does it. But that's a very poor way to do it because the comeback from that money is so small. But going into other kinds of investments can work better, and that's, again, where you can learn, well, what are better investments, and what are the risks, and what are the advantages? And it becomes a game, and it can become fun once you understand that you really are in control of these ideas. But I'm getting ahead of that. You're saying, what's financial independence? When the money that you have working for you pays the bills. Not necessarily pays for your Learjet so you can fly around the world and go to all the fabulous parties you want to, but just when, whatever your lifestyle is currently, if you no longer had to work to sustain it, that it was paid for, you're financially independent. I'm going to mention something else. Folks that are depending upon the government to do this for them, we're figuring, well, if I get disabled and I can go on welfare and I can get Social Security and that's going to do the job. The problem there is that it's still not under your control. It's under the control of the people who are deciding how much money will go into those programs. So I really, even though I'm very in favor of people who can afford to do that and they can live that way, but it doesn't have the same power that you feel when you know that, well, I'm really in control of this. So that's my overall view. And how to go about achieving it? Was that part of the question, if I heard correctly?
That was actually going to be, well, yeah, go ahead. I'll let you
No.
And then I have a follow-up.
Okay. Either way, this is your gig.
Go ahead. How should people try to achieve that?
Two things, in my opinion, are the easiest ways to do this today, no matter what your current situation, as long as you don't have the wolf at the door and you're facing an eviction with no food in the refrigerator, okay? If you're not in an ultimate emergency right now, and that is to assess your skills and then sell them on the Internet. That's a way to immediately start to generate more money through work. Now, that's still you making money, but that enables you to then grow that money. And I usually suggest just a couple of things for most folks, and financial experts have probably greater details on this, but mine are pretty limited. I just simply suggest, first, try to save enough money from what you are doing extra so that you have an emergency fund. So if you did lose your job currently and you needed X amount of dollars to pay the bills, you would have X number of months available that you could do that without having to go broke. You would still have the money there. The second level, after you have some emergency funding, is to then go ahead and start to look at, well, where can I put extra money to work to start generating money through generally investments. That seems to be one of the better ways, and there's all kinds of investments. That's where you need to start to become educated with people who know more about it than you probably would guess. There are experts, I think I'm talking to two of them right now, who can probably guide you with that kind of thing. So that's basically where I say is to go with that. And then when you have acquired enough money coming in so that you are in a position where it does pay the bills, there are other ways to invest for that situation so that then you can step away from it and just monitor it from a distance, maybe checking things once a month or once a year to make sure everything is still in place. But really having the ability to, if you don't want to keep playing the money game, to retire from it and just be financially independent, to then do whatever else you might want to do with your time instead of just using your time to be a slave to making money. The word wage slave is sadly all too true for too many people, and I would really like to see more Satanists be able to say, maybe I was one, but I'm no longer one, which is always a nice feeling. So that's kind of my overview on it. What do you gentlemen think?
I wanted to go back and touch on one point you made, which is not depending on the government. That's a big one, and I see it too often, and I've seen people have that taken away from them. And if that's the only source of income that you're relying upon is the government, whether it's Social Security or veterans benefits or whatever it may be, and you get that pulled away from you, it's devastating. It is devastating and life-changing. And I know some people have the belief that, I'm not able to do anything else, whether it's because of a disability or they've just never had to do anything else before, or maybe they think they're too old. I'm retired and, I'm receiving these benefits now from my retirement. That can be taken away from you in, a matter of days and turn your life upside down. So I always recommend to people to, seek other sources of income. Don't just rely on the government. And the same can go for mommy and daddy as well. If you happen to be rich or your parents happen to be rich and you're used to getting money from them, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But I wouldn't recommend relying upon it.
Yeah, exactly. And to both of your points, I have to say it ties to both of your points, because we talk about financial independence and we talk about making sure that the house isn't on fire, that you're not in that pressing situation and then getting that foundation. Well, what about the people who are in that position right now? I was there once. I know that Devilmaycare was there once. But there's one thing, and there's no school for this, and there's nowhere you're going to learn it. It's pride. It's that inner black flame. I was average Joe. I did well in school, and I never figured out what I wanted to do. And what ended up happening is I fell behind. And I found myself in a situation where I was scraping by and just barely making ends meet, and there was a matter of pride. It stung me personally, and I was not willing to accept this. And I decided that I was going to do something about it. And whether you want to learn about finances or any industry that you're passionate about, you've got to dig in deep and demand more of yourself and work until you get to a point where you can put out those fires and get that foundation. And I just don't see enough people willing to put in the work. They do want to rely on the government. They do want to get angry. But you need to be angry at yourself whenever credit is due there. You've got to have that internal flame that is not going to accept the situation as it is. And once you have that and you put in the work, that's how you'll get to that point where you can start. You can call that, your starting point.
Overall, I would agree. I can also feel very much how folks get trapped into that too, because once again it goes back to this pessimistic overview of the world we're in. They assume, well, what's the use? It's all going to fail anyway. What is the new film that just came out? They redid, trying to recall the science fiction film that was
Blade Runner?
Blade Runner 2047 or 2049 or something.
Yep.
And so, carry on with that, which is once again, the world is going to hell in a handbasket. What's the use? And I think that what's the use is the thing that gets a lot of people, because they say, oh, well, I've built up my life to this point, and then it was all ripped away from me. They did it to me. What's the use? Which is another word for that is called depression. If you want to beat depression, I think the very first thing, you're right, is that you need to be willing to fight for your freedom. And your freedom from the pessimism that would paralyze you from being able to do what you can do. Are there situations that are hopeless? Obviously so. It happens. But never say die. Because the point is that once again, never bet on doomsday. Maybe this is the time when if you rise up on the back legs and give it another push, you will roll that boulder out of your way and you will succeed. Or maybe it wasn't a big boulder after all. Maybe it was just a push button and it was actually an elevator that can take you right up. Mm-hmm. The problem here is, I think, primarily psychological. I really do think that all too many people assume that it's pointless and hopeless. One concept that kind of works against some people doing exactly what I think they ought to be doing, that I've been describing, is where I think that the world is actually going, and I don't see any easy way for it to not happen, which is actually going to be such incredible wealth due to robotics, due to artificial intelligence. The day will come, I fully expect to live long enough to see it, when money will cease to exist, because we won't need it. Because it will be that everything that you can possibly imagine that you would need or want will be available. And I won't go into all of that, why I believe that is true, but the thing is that perspective alone is another one to say to people, look, if you can hang in there, you may be just seeing the curtain rise on the most amazing future that has ever existed for human beings. You don't want to miss this show. If you miss this show, you're kicking yourself all over hell. So anyway, I didn't mean to take it into the wrong area, but that's one.
No, not at all.
It's always struck me as this assumption of what's the use? And, well, maybe you just have to reach inside and say, aren't you the use? Aren't you the reason that it's about? Don't you have to decide that it's important enough to you that you're willing to do something? Sure.
Exactly.
And it is. I also can say that I can easily understand somebody being struck down and for a short time just being devastated. If you whack me in the head with a rock, I'm going to be devastated. I'll be lying there going, what the hell is going on? Or even just unconscious. But hopefully I'm going to become conscious again and then say, okay, now what can I do? And it's that attitude that I think really makes all the difference with these things, is understanding you can. Boy, I'm sounding like a cheerleader today, aren't I?
That's good, though.
No, not at all.
I think the audience needs, some of the audience, I always generalize, but some of the audience I feel needs a cheerleader. I remember personally, living in poverty, and that sense of shame and anger and embarrassment was just overwhelming. And the way I got past it, and the way I tell my kids to get past everything, is everything's hard until you figure it out. And you just have to figure it out one step at a time. None of us were born walking, not one. We figured it out one step at a time. And the same thing applies to whether it's investing or building a business or whatever path you decide to pursue, it's one step at a time.
I agree. And Satanism is such a pragmatic religion. And we've read all the books. We've read the satanic scriptures. We know that good is that which benefits me. But I see often that people fail to take that and connect the dots to their own life. If good is that which benefits me, well, money benefits me. It's worth learning about. It's worth starting. And it's the old cliche, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. You've got to do something. Pick something anywhere that you're even remotely interested in, get going.
Oh, boy, that is so on target with everything I think is true. Once a person does find something that they are really, really interested in, and today with the Internet, the possibilities are just exploding. There's so many different ways that people can take that, put it out there, do something that they really enjoy doing, not necessarily like, if anyone hasn't seen the movie Office Space, I recommend it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That's one of everything. That's what most people say. That's the white-collar hell. I don't want to have to work in an office cubicle and do that. But the thing is that there is this tremendous opportunity now. And the thing is, I'm going to be very clear that I've seen people take it and do it. I'm not just speaking about hypotheticals here. I'm not talking about, oh, well, this is a great idea. Let's go. No faith required. It's just a matter of discovering what's actually out there. Once people know that they can accomplish something they want, they have motivation. As long as they don't think it can work, if you really want something, and as long as you don't know how to get there, motivation may or may not come. That's why I'm saying right now, anyone listening to this, I hope you will look at what we're talking about, because if you discover that there are steps you can take that will actually lead you to where you want to go and have money as your servant instead of being your master, it's well worth it. It's a wonderful experience to live life from that kind of position. I highly recommend it. You'll love it. Trust me.
Nemo,
Yeah.
that actually kind of leads me into my next question, and that is, you often talk about identity is not utility.
Yes.
Or did I get that right or backwards?
Yes, that's exactly right. Or
Okay.
utility is not identity, yeah.
Care to explain what that means and describe how it applies to money and wealth creation?
Yeah, big time. The myth that what you do is what makes you worthy is the self-esteem trap. I am and have been totally opposed to self-esteem. I believe in self-acceptance. Self-esteem is putting a price tag on your soul and saying, I'm worth this amount. That's what esteem is. I'm esteeming or evaluating myself. And the reason that is such a trap is because, first of all, it's untrue. You are not what you do. Identity is not utility. You can do so many, many different things, and some you can do very brilliantly, others you may screw up. I know I sure can. And the thing is that, however, I am not the product of what I'm doing. A lot of people will not even try to succeed at business or try to start investing or saving money or even trying to get a better job than the one they may have right now because they're afraid that if they fail, they'll be a failure. You can never be a failure. You can only do things that either will succeed or fail by some measure. You are flexible. You can keep doing different things. As long as you're alive, there is hope that you can do other things. So the reason I stress this is because one of the greatest delusions that saturates our world today, and by the way, it works extremely well for controlling masses of people. It has worked for thousands of years. It's the way that we teach our kids to be sure to learn how to control their bowels so they don't crap in the floor. We do this all the way up through as we grow older to why we consent. It's all based on if I can get you to evaluate yourself and punish yourself if you don't live up to my standards, I have control over you. Mm-hmm. And that is exactly what I think is the opposite of what Satanism is about. In my opinion, a very, very big part of Satanism is breaking free from confusing you with what you do. So am I saying that if you became a multimillionaire and you had more money than you knew what to do with, that you would suddenly not say, oh, gee, I'm such a great person because I'm rich. Yeah, I'd say, no, you're not a great person at all. You're just a person who can enjoy doing different things, who can view the universe as a toolbox that you can use as opposed to a mirror in which you are looking back at yourself and trying to decide whether you look good or not. This entire business.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah, this entire business of identifying with how well or poorly you do at something is untrue. It's a global generalization, and it is the source of tremendous pain throughout all of humanity. As I said, we use it in order to teach small pets, cats and dogs, and small children to obey and to become civilized. But then after that, it grows, and it becomes part of social mores and all the kinds of things that Dr. LaVey rebelled against and said, hey, what do you mean that these are 7 bad sins? The deadly sins are wonderful guides to how you can find happiness. If you just stop thinking that you are what you do, it's an incredibly enlightening and freeing moment. So that's what I've been babbling about. How it applies to money and wealth creation? Okay. People who suddenly become very wealthy due to an inheritance, or some of our sports stars who just get an incredible amount of money all of a sudden, commonly will blow it. 10, 20 years later, they'll be broke. It's not uncommon. And that isn't
very
because,
common.
Yeah, it is very common. And it isn't because they necessarily didn't have the desire to keep their money. It's primarily because I believe that they think many of these beliefs about money are true. They feel guilty that they have money and other people don't. They feel that there was a limited amount of resources in the world and they ate up too much. They don't believe in the idea of production, the idea that wealth creates more wealth. I'll give you one example. All the folks listening, if you're not familiar with this, one big complaint against rich people is they say, oh, look at him, he's on that yacht and he's having champagne and spending all this money, and he has these people that are there. They're providing the food, the cook, the servants, the cook, the captain of the ship, all the people that are involved with his huge party. What a wasteful person. He just paid the salaries for every person on that boat that was working for him. He has purchased the food that was produced and by farmers who had to have it processed and shipped into grocery stores where it was purchased by the cooks that came in and brought the party together. All these people were benefiting from the exchange of money that was going on from it. Yes.
Additionally, I'd like to point out that if that person is wealthy enough to be on a yacht and own the yacht, be paying these people, somewhere there was production going on. Either he produced something of value to society in order to make that money, whether through a business or a high-paying job or whatever, or his parents did, and it was passed down to him. Somewhere along the line, somebody produced something.
Exactly. Even if you've got a person who inherited that amount of money, something was produced. Somebody did something.
Yep.
And there's
always
going to start.
I agree. Perfect. You got me off on a good rant. Congratulations. That's one of my favorites.
We've covered such a wide variety of topics here and some great advice. What would you say, or do you have any parting thoughts or words of wisdom that if there's something that the listeners could walk away with, what would you give to them?
Okay. I would say that probably one of the most important things as a principle to really dig into is when you're going to be making a decision, even about what we're talking about, to consider, well, do these guys sound like they know what they're talking about or not? Anything. Do a risk-reward evaluation before you make any decision. Say, what are the risks involved and what are the potential rewards? And really try to be as honest as you can about that. And whenever you find that the risk is much greater than the reward, don't do it. Only do things that have a greater reward to the risk ratio. And in that fashion, you will tend to, all by itself, make money at whatever you're doing that involves money. And the other one is I'm going to recommend education. Be willing to consider what other people are saying if they can walk the talk. Don't just listen to people because they say it's true. Look at people who have accomplished things that you want to accomplish and listen to them. Peter Thiel, one of the billionaires today, is actually now paying, I think it's $35,000 scholarships to high school students, a certain limited number of them. I think he does about 30 a year. And he'll say, if you're willing to drop out of high school and start a business, I'll pay you $35,000 to get started. And that's because he knows that you can accomplish more by taking action and getting into the real world and doing things than you can just acquiring academic knowledge. Now, I'm not against academic knowledge, but again, there's a risk-reward ratio that I'm looking at. And if you're going, and this is for anybody who's in college right now, if you don't know what you are in college doing, why you're there, what the outcome is supposed to be, if it's related to getting into any kind of a job, and you don't know what that job is, you need to go to the U.S. Department of Labor's Occupational Guide, which is free on the Internet, and find out what do I really want to be able to do, and what are the real things that are required in order to become good at it. Because one of the worst things you can do, and anybody who's there, I apologize for bringing up a sad moment, but if you are thousands and tens of thousands in debt for going to college and then you come out and you can't even get a job, that's not a good place to be. So if you haven't done that, or even if you are in school now and you don't know why and you're not there on a free scholarship, for heaven's sakes, stop and look at what I was just describing and decide, what do I really want to do? Train for that. Go for that. You may discover that you do have to go to college to get a degree in something or other to do it. You'll find out. And then, please, when you've identified a goal like that for an occupation, go and find people who are currently working in that field and interview them and find out what that's like. See if you can even sit in on their work. Be brave and courageous enough to do that, and you will save yourself decades of pain if you don't. Please. That's my final word on all of that. Yes.
On that note, Nemo, I personally want to thank you. We've been speaking some 13, 14 years now, and it was that very advice that got me started on my career path. So thank you for giving it to me, and thank you again for sharing it with the audience as well.
Well, this has been a pleasure and an honor to speak to you, and an honor to speak to Mammon. Thank you both for having me on.
Thank you very much.
Hail Satan.
Hail Satan.